Welcome to the Colorado Real Estate Leaders Podcast, brought to you by Trailstone Insurance Group, bringing you interviews with Colorado's best real estate and mortgage professionals, empowering you to understand the current trends in the housing market so you can make the American dream your reality. Enjoy today's episode.
Well, it's a great day in Colorado, and welcome to the Colorado Real Estate Leaders Podcast. Today, we have with us Benjamin Martin, who's the Senior VP and Commercial Lending at Collegiate Peaks Bank. Benjamin, welcome to the program.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Hey, you're welcome. So I always love when we talk about unique aspects of the real estate industry, and I think that commercial lending is quite a big, broad topic. So I'm excited to learn from you. Get us started with your story and background. What is your background, and how did you get into commercial lending?
Yeah, so I started in banking in 2001. My final interview to get into the industry was on 9/11, and as a 22-year-old kid, I wasn't paying attention to a lot of things. And I showed up for the interview, and everybody had this. There was an air of panic, and I couldn't quite figure out what it was. But as they told me what had happened, they said, the industry is going to change, and we're going to offer you the job, but just know that things are not going to look the same from a banking perspective of what you've probably known in the past. Like, I'm 22, so I don't really know what I'm getting into. But but that's kind of where I started in the retail side of banking. So slowly moved my way up, managed some offices around the country, and I'm from Colorado originally, and so after probably about 10 years around, I came back and moved into commercial lending as an analyst. That was 2007. So I not only got to experience all the aftermath of 9/11 as it related to the banking world, but also the impending crash that happened about 6 months after I started. So there was
well seasoned
education. Yeah.
two major issues for the banking industry there.
Yeah. Yep.
And then so you transitioned into commercial lending. When did you were a commercial analyst around 2007. When did you transition into the lending side?
That was my first foray into commercial lending. And then I moved up as an analyst. I worked for a couple of different banks. The one that I started with in 2007 failed in about 2011. And then ended up as an analyst at Wells Fargo, moved kind of downstream into a community bank in Lakewood. And was promoted to assistant vice president as a commercial lender in 2013. Nice. So just about 6 years.
So you have seen a lot of different things happening in between bank failures and everything else. So gives you some great perspective, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's been. I talked to a lot of lenders and credit officers and folks that have been in the industry for as long as I've been alive, and they talk about the number of recessions that they have left and all the things that have been thrown at the economy as a whole. But banking is one of those staples as kind of the backbone of the economy, and we have to pivot obviously through catastrophe and good times and bad times, and being able to be there to take care of our clients. So obviously the most recent was COVID, and that was turned everybody on their heads, not just in the banking world, right? So
sure. So you've had a wide variety of experiences and different roles and everything. So what do you like most about what you're doing now in your profession?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've been a banker since I was 5 years old. So I was lending money to my siblings, and learned quickly that was probably not the best.
Were you the banker in Monopoly as well?
I was, very much so. I got a picture of when I was, probably about 3 or 4, and I had a vest and a tie on, and it just seemed to make sense. So there are a lot of people that just fall into the industry, but I feel like it's always been a part of me. And being from Denver, being a Colorado native, the thing that I love the most is just watching it grow and watching businesses succeed as part of at least my efforts and in what I do, and just watching the greater Denver area, and obviously how Colorado benefit from small business, and how banking can provide that service versus being a hindrance to progress. So
So talk a little bit about the difference between residential lending and commercial lending, because I know that anytime you hear, oh, it's Zoom commercial, or, there's a lot of different tiers and levels of commercial properties. And I know that probably the underwriting guidelines are vastly different.
Yeah, from a lot of it's driven from a regulatory standpoint. So obviously, having the experience that we had through 2000, I've got a lot of trucks going by. Going through what happened in 2007, and a lot of the consumer lending laws and regulations have changed, and it's a lot of those changes were intended to protect consumers, and I guess where the residential versus commercial comes from. Very much single family lending to individuals to be able to buy, primary residences, and, looking at home equity lines of credit, consumer, as you're looking at auto loans and those types of things. As commercial goes, primarily focused on, companies, and, obviously real estate transactions from whether it's warehouse or industrial, retail, multifamily, office, a lot of those types of asset classes. So, residential is much more focused on the, maybe it's the 1 to 4 families, or, an occasional investment single family property. But as commercial goes, it seems like everything else, right? So there's, land and all the other asset classes that I listed before.
Yeah. So let's think about something. When you were working with a borrower, helping them with a commercial lending project, what is that project typically looking like? Like in residential, it's like I'm helping people either buy their first home, buy an investment property, or refinance their home. So there's a few, of those, but what is a typical commercial project look like?
So what I love about what I do there, it feels like there's nothing that's typical. But I work with a lot of local companies that, may be renting their space, and, we all know what's been happening in the rental market, both on the residential and the commercial side. And so, we had the opportunity of helping companies buy, maybe it's a warehouse to expand operations, or a retail operation that wants to expand as well, or, your normal operating company that just is tired of paying exorbitant rent and wants to be their own landlord. I think from a commercial real estate standpoint, as investors go, there's a lot of different forms that takes. And so, it can be, a real estate investor that may want to buy a multifamily property and add some value to it, and, update some, carpet and painting, and, increase rents and that type of stuff. But it's also, maybe somebody owns a strip center, or like I said, an office building. And so those are typically the transactions that we see. We've also been doing, Collegiate has been pretty active in the residential construction world. So we'll work with home builders that are, maybe doing an infill project where there's a house that needs to be torn down and put up something, fancy and new, and we'll finance part of that project as well.
I love how you described from your very beginning, day one of the interview, 9/11, and then you mentioned the 07, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, whatever timeframe that is of the, economic crash of the housing market. And then we've come through COVID. There's these spikes in the economy that cause ripple effects, positive or negative, to the economy and mortgage lending and commercial lending. And one question is, given what we've come through with COVID and more people going with, hey, you know what, let's go virtual, let's go remote, maybe that's going to impact the commercial market. What are you seeing with the commercial market as it relates to, forecast and future? And, is it going to be a blip and dip in the economy and it's going to come back, kind of like the housing market did? Or do you find that people are now going to need to get pretty creative in their commercial, property and obtaining commercial properties?
Yeah, of course. I think the biggest impact that we've seen as a result of COVID, and the remote versus in office, the office market is, in certain segments. I've talked to a lot of commercial brokers, and it's a lot of them are kind of just sitting on their hands right now, because there's especially downtown, there's a lot of vacancies, and slowly but surely, I think companies are bringing their workers back. As you're looking at different generations, and obviously some of the younger have been more accustomed to working remote. I think suburban office has bounced back a little bit better. As people are moving out of potentially moving out of downtown, there's still a lot of companies that are moving here, but they're kind of in the outskirts. So some are moving into Adams County, some into Boulder County. Cherry Creek office has been really strong. I think it's kind of an anomaly as it relates to overall office, but a lot of my clients have workers coming back, and they're able to come into the office, and not much of that has changed. But I think the biggest impact in the office asset class and the multifamily, obviously, as well, with respect to people being able to afford rents now, and those have continued to go up, and we're hoping that they stabilize a little bit just from an affordability standpoint. But those have been the biggest impact, I think, at least in the commercial real estate world. Industrial and warehouse, I think, remain pretty strong, but like everything else, it feels like the supply is limited, and that's changed quite a bit over the last, call it 11 or 12 years since marijuana was legalized here in Colorado. A lot of that warehouse was taken up, but we're starting to see some of that open up as that industry has declined a little bit.
Is there a certain sector in commercial properties and lending that you feel is going to come back sooner than other sectors? Because I do feel that some people are just going to go, you know what, we're walking away from this sector, but wow, whenever you push down on a seesaw, the other side comes up. So where one sector might not come back strong, another one might, revive and come to life. What are you seeing in that respect?
Absolutely. Seeing retail bounce back. I mean, if we rewind 3 years, retail was something that nobody wanted a part of because they were restricted of how many people were allowed in their shops, or if it was a restaurant, they had to pivot. And obviously a lot of closures with restaurants, some of the retail over the last 3 years, but that's bouncing back pretty strong. And there's been, like anything, like you mentioned with the seesaw, people in retail have pivoted pretty well and adapted to, I'm not going to call it the new normal by any stretch, but I think as people have backed away from office, some have tried to convert those to multifamily. And then, obviously with retail and new services and goods being presented as progress goes in the city, retail's, from what I've heard from all of my commercial real estate brokers and contacts, that's bounced back stronger than I think anybody really anticipated. So, I mean, when door gets closed on one asset class and then it gets opened up in a brand new one. So, and there was, as a result of COVID, there was a lot of money that was, hanging out on the sidelines because nobody knew what was going to be happening. And now, as that kind of gets flooded back into the market, being able to find inventory. But some of those, there's a lot of types of properties that are still relatively strong, but I know that there's plenty of investors that are backing away from, in some ways multifamily, and some, obviously with office, but it's also kind of, sub-market driven. So there are other places like Colorado Springs that are just hitting the ball out of the park, so to speak. So still very, very strong markets in and around the metro.
Yeah, there's never one stock, cookie cutter. This is the way it always is. You're going to have a pocket here and a pocket there. And I think that's awesome. I think a lot of times when people say, I'm really proud about my career because we have seen this or accomplished that. What are some of the proud moments that you've seen over the course of your career, other than what I would surmise as being tenacious of persevering through all of those blips over the years? But what other proud moments have you seen in your career?
Yeah, I think I have a long list of clients that, maybe it started out with a small, $10,000 line of credit, and, that expanded into a $500,000 line of credit and buying some equipment, and then being able to ultimately buy their own real estate. And a lot of business owners and real estate owners are really proud of what they own, and being able to be a part of that and serve my clients and finding ways to help them has been really, really just fantastic for me. And it's, it trickles down to every part of the economy where, I have a company that we financed there. It was actually an office building in central Denver. They're going to be able to occupy and expand their operations. And it wouldn't have been possible had I probably not been tenacious enough. But I pushed really hard because I care about my clients, and they're paying their employees so that they can put food on the table, and creating jobs in and around Denver. So those are, those stories get put to life really around opportunities in the city, and I can say that I'm really proud of that. And the second answer would be through COVID and the payroll protection program, where I worked for a small bank through that, and we were able to fund a good amount of PPP loans, and keeping people paid through one of the most challenging economic times, and at least in my career, and a lot of others as well.
Mm-hmm. And what I hear from that is we don't just look at numbers and papers and transactions. We look at people, and we love to see the stories behind and the results and the transformation of the people. And that's what you want to hear from a banker. So I think that is spectacular, Ben.
Yep. That's what I love about what I do.
Well, if someone is interested in learning more and connecting with you, what's the best way they can do that?
Yeah. So, I have all my contact information at our website, which is collegiatepeaksbank.com. And I work in the River North office, so we're just off of 36th and Brighton Boulevard. So we're smack dab between about 46 construction projects, and watching our area grow. We're just a little tiny office that's surrounded by a lot of industry that's coming this way. So we're in River North, right next to a doggy daycare, and best way to reach me is obviously by phone, and like I said, all my contact information through our website. But I'm at ben.martin@collegiatepeaksbank.com via email, and direct numbers 303-481-1358. So that's usually the best way to get a hold of me.
Awesome, Ben. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a real pleasure talking with you today.
Yeah, thank you again for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Colorado Real Estate Leaders Podcast, brought to you by Trailstone Insurance Group. To learn more about the topics mentioned on today's show, or listen to past episodes, visit www.coloradorealestateleaders.com.